Thank you all for joining, and thanks for pulling away from the expo floor for a few moments. And sorry for shouting at anybody in the first row here. We'd like to have a bit, as much as we can in this forum, of an interactive session to talk a little bit about what it takes to really brave this connected world. And for a couple of seconds about us so you have a sense of who's guiding the conversation here. We're with a firm called CGS Advisors based in Detroit, Michigan. It's an international advisory firm focused on really strategic transformation and innovation. And we oftentimes are advising our clients on the effects of the connected world in their business. So not necessarily in their product, but really what the effects of connectivity means to their business. And myself, I'm the CEO of the company. We founded it back in 2008. I'm also adjunct faculty at a university in Michigan where we've developed a connected world program that we're looking to now expand, but it's been running for 3 years, duly listed in the engineering and business schools there, and it's part of the MBA curriculum. And I'm also a mentor in a number of different programs, one of which is Techstars Mobility, which is getting a lot of press out at CES through Ford Motor Company this past year. I'm joined today by Warren Ritchie. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks very much, Warren Ritchie. I am with CGS Advisors. I lead the transformation services practice and offering with CGS Advisors. I am 27 years in automotive. All the roles that I've had are essentially to lead some sort of transformation, whether we're putting subsidiaries together, whether we're trying to become more consumer-oriented, whether we're trying to embrace the internet technology, and now with CGS working with the industry to start to prepare for Internet of Things, connected vehicle. What does that really mean? So that's my background. This is what we're doing. Turn it to Greg.
I'll do the old handoff here. So if you found your way here, you either needed a seat to catch up on some messages, or there was something in the birds of the feather description that may have attracted you. So here's what we'd like to be able to do. We're going to share some slides and some thoughts with you. And what we hope to be able to do is explore really the readiness of industries, not necessarily the IoT industry or what you see here, but all the industries that are being affected, which is really every industry, as we all know. Explore the readiness for them around connectivity, around embracing these Internet of Things, potentially beyond the product. And discuss, hopefully, a bit with you, if possible, what it takes to prepare that. We really think there's a lot of technology innovation happening, and there's a lot of great conversations going on around the different parts of the stack. But are all the traditional industries out there, all of the people that make things, for instance, that they now are connected to the Internet, are they really ready? And we hope that people that are here from companies that are putting things to market might be able to participate, or those of you that are maybe in business development or strategy functions inside of a technology company will be able to lend some advice. And at the end, we want to talk a little bit about where can we go with this. Is certification the right way to go? Are more roundtable sessions, or is a business track the right way to go for some of these conversations? But first, we want to share some thoughts that we have on the topic. Okay. Now, I know I'm competing with the drones. If any of them kind of come over and float over top, I'll look for you to give me the warning. And let me know if you can't hear in the back, and I'll scream as loud as I can. So oftentimes I teach undergraduate and graduate programs around connectivity, and I often ask how many people have a mobile device on them. I'm certain I don't need to ask this audience. I'm sure every one of you does, and probably have multiple of them. But there are 3.65 billion people in the world, or 3.65 billion devices in the world that are in existence and carried around every day. You all understand that we live in a very connected world, and if I had to guess, 54% on average here in North America, that is the statistic, 54% of you this morning, before you got a cup of coffee or used the restroom or put on deodorant, the first thing you did was check a mobile device. Now, I know that's not necessarily Internet of Things, but the underlying pattern here is we live in a connected society. The society that these things are going into is already quite connected. And there's more and more connected stuff. And typically I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes on the build of this slide, but for this audience I don't need to. The bottom line is you're already all here because you're trying to enable this or maybe bring a device to market, no matter if it's a wearable or a car or a connected price tag, which is actually more of connected supply chain where you can do dynamic-based pricing, or the connected diaper, or on and on and on. You guys have probably got better examples than I do. The reality is there's just a lot of connected stuff, and you've all seen these, 50 billion or 20 billion or 75 billion, some billion number by the year 2020, a lot of them. If you believe the 50 billion piece, another statistic that I find often works with folks is that we have 1% of the world's things connected this year, actually 2015. But by 2020, we would have just shy of 3% of the world connected, if you believe these figures. There's a lot of growth beyond that. And what does that really mean for all of the industries and all of the people competing out there? There's a lot of product conversations, and Carl and his group has really driven this beyond that with the fog piece on analytics and a lot of the conversations on the different tracks. But the first thing about the Internet of Things is a misnomer. It's not really all about the thing. It's nice that it made its way into the name, but it's really about the sensors and the data and the information, because those sensors create the data create insights, those insights can create services or experiences, and it's those services or experiences that are disrupting. It's not the data alone, it's not the sensors, it's not the embedded. None of those are disrupting. It's the end game of that stream that is disrupting to industries. And it's that form that we kind of start with that says, we're not sure that industries understand that disruption. There's a lot going on in the sensors, and can I get that thing engineered in? But are they really looking at the end game, and are they preparing the industry? Are the leaders in those industries really prepared to be able to drive the kind of change that this has the ability to do? So I'm looking for a nod from the audience and anybody back there that can hear. So can we just agree that we live in a connected world and we're all going to be there, right? We came to this conference. There must be a reason that we believe in this. And again, another 5 or 10 minutes typically of the uneducated audience I would spend talking about the why. I don't think I need to do it, but I'll just give you the background, the icons, right? Why is this happening now? People talk for a long well, we've had connected vehicles for a long time. We've had connected shipping containers for a long time. The reason for the growth is this simple. We finally have a ubiquitous network. Yesterday there were a lot of different people talking about which network it should be. Is it this one or that? New entrance, new build-out, proprietary, not whatever. There's a ubiquitous network. Somebody smarter than I am will figure out which one. Embedded technology is becoming real. Things are small enough, fast enough, powerful enough, and frankly cheap enough to go in places they never made sense to before. We've got the cloud. Everybody, I think, has heard about this thing called the cloud, but the bottom line is for a young entrepreneur or for a established corporation, it removes tremendous barriers. You can basically sip what you need, and somebody else will take the capital investment. You remove the capital barriers, which is allowing for incredible growth. Those billions of people that are carrying mobile devices, they also simplify the stack because you don't need to bring the technology. The user will bring the technology on some applications, but that also removes incredible barriers. So this is a barrier removal equation here. The users, you guys are generating tons of social content that can be mashed up, and then the users themselves evolve. More and more firms that care about this thing, or we're going to need to care about it by the 2020, 2030 timeframe, they're going after the digital natives who expect this kind of information, okay? I don't think I need to go a lot more detail. There's a lot more opportunity out there. This audience probably understands that. This is really where the conversation starts. So what? Why will your customers care? For those of you that are creating devices, why will your ecosystems care? Why do the users care? And why should the leaders of traditional industries, why should the CEO of auto companies or of energy companies or of really the companies that create the GDP of this nation and really of the world, why should they care? Technology companies, it's clear why they care. But why should a technology-oriented company, why should they care? So this is where we start the conversation. We think they should care because those leaders don't want to be the frog in the proverbial pot. Now, Carl can probably give you a lot of stats on how this particular conference has grown. How it grew out of a small, as I understand it, out of a small track, and then kind of grew up and it became its own thing, and now you have thousands of people attending. And every year, I would guess that evolution also would parallel the number of connected pieces around these leaders' lives. But so rarely do people stand back and say, well, what's the real patterns that are starting to emerge here? Really, what are the patterns? Because every one of those sensors, every one of those connected devices is just slowly heating the water. The water just starts boiling, and those leaders don't really necessarily feel the full dynamic that's going on here. It's Warren and my opinion that we're facing something quite a bit bigger than just some technical connections. We think that this is the next technical discontinuity. All right. Perhaps we were talking last night. You could call this a paradigm shift. Okay. This is the massive change in the context in which these companies are going to compete and their end customers are going to live, work, and play. This is massive. And there's not a lot of pattern of this particular technical discontinuity to talk about, well, where is it going? But it's oftentimes helpful to look to the past. So here are some examples of other technological discontinuities. The steam engine, electrical power generation and distribution, the advent of silicon in the first place. These are technologies that completely changed the paradigm in which many industries competed, not just the ones creating the devices. If you look up the definition of the technological discontinuity, you'll see that these are the types of things that disrupt industries, so restack the players, and they disrupt across industries. Redefine, I've heard this term at this conference at least a dozen times, the white spaces. But I'm looking at the white spaces not within an industry, but between industries. That's the kind of discontinuity, and that's the reason leaders need to be prepared around a massive transformation, not a technical one. A massive competitive transformation. And so I think this is where I'll hand it over to you, Warren, to talk a little bit about what that might mean for strategic change. I don't think he doesn't brag about this often, but I think this will probably be, for most of you, the only person that you've ever heard speak to you that's a PhD in corporate strategy. He knows a lot about massive change for corporations.
Yeah, we're either a dying breed or somebody who's really yet to be discovered. All that setup, I think, feels familiar to you guys, but not necessarily to the drivers of core industry today that drive so much of GDP and so much of the activity in this economy, and that's really the current producers of things. And so what I've been working with for most of my career is Fortune 100 companies and helping them understand transformations that occur over time, some technological, some consumer, some legislative, and how to rethink what they do and retool how they do it so they have a fit in this new environment. And the Internet of Things, or the connected world, is the next in a series of waves of technologies that are going to have a very major effect on society and how we actually generate economic wealth and how we actually preserve ourselves as a species on this planet. We just think it's that big of a deal. But the nice thing about it, from our perspective, and from my perspective as an academic and doing the PhD, there are patterns in the way firms respond to technical discontinuities, and those patterns are enduring. So, because there's one common element in all of those continuities, and that's humans. Humans socially organized in economic entities to try to deliver value. And they behave similarly, whether it's the steam engine, whether it's the Internet. My dissertation was on adoption of Internet direct sales channels, and which firms do and which firms don't, and why they do faster, some faster than others. And those patterns are enduring, and they're going to be the patterns by which organizations will adopt in this technological discontinuity. That's what we believe in. And so what we're trying to do is now get ahead of the curve and start to work with clients to say, you need to start to prepare because there's some warning signs that you're either too fast or too slow. Too fast is typically not the problem. Too slow. And there are ways to look at your organization, self-diagnose, and then start to say, are we missing something? Are we at risk of being surprised by a new entrant? And that's essentially the service offering. So I've jumped to the punchline, and now I'm going to show you some slides which sort of worked its way through that. And forgive me, it's going to be 101 because these are slides that we use from the world of people who produce things, not this audience so much, who understand all of this. Here we go. Before the discontinuity, there were firms. Firms have a service offering of things. They have markets, and everything is differentiated based on the value of the things. The price, the value in use, and all of this. The firm's basis of competition is well established and understood within an industry, and there is some stability in the markets and the industries. They're well defined. They're almost like individual entities, molecular. Okay? Everybody gets that. What we're now talking about, and this is a slide that we use in the actual Oakland University course with students who are MBA students predominantly, is essentially things are changing. Clever people have invented sensors that can allow things to communicate to each other and say a variety of things about their current state or about where they are or what they're doing and all of that. And that communication, those things informing each other, is starting to generate information that people can see a way to commercialize, and those are becoming services. And these new services are changing markets. They're actually creating markets. They're in this one market plus another market. Actually, the sum of those two may be bigger than the initial sum because it's going to bring more people in. And I know the people in this room and at this conference understand that that's just a simple view of it. When you multiply that by an industry with buyers, suppliers, competitors, and then new entrants coming in, the new value being created explodes. But when we talk with our clients, we start at this level. So guys, let's not be intimidated by this stuff. Let's just talk about what it really is, and let's find a way that we can think about how do we make some decisions about this. Because the next thing is when we put these two slides together, I say, look, it used to be this, and people made it to be CEO or COO or CFO in this world, and they got it. They got the industry down. They know the industry recipes. My dissertation advisor, Rich Bettison, he wrote a paper called Dominant Logic, and it basically says that over a period of a career, individuals learn intuitively how their industry works and how their company works. And as decisions and issues start to come towards them, they're already formulating, I know what this is, and here's the solution set, and we're going to do it this way. But when we talk about this, people are saying, wait a minute, that's not what I'm used to. It's very different. And we're saying, in the future, product's not enough. The vehicle's not enough. That's a big shock to car companies. It's a bit of a boon to the electronics engineers. They're embracing this tremendously. It's a bit of a challenge for the marketing parts of the organization to try to think through the implications. I've done a lot of work with importers, automobile importers, and they're not so heavily involved in the design of the vehicle. They're getting the vehicles, and they're having to figure out how do we leverage this into value in the marketplace. So when we go to them and say, are you thinking this through? Do you have a big vision? Are you building back from that? Their answers are not always as confident as you would hope they might be. And the big question in there is, who's creating this value? Because what we've said is, intentionally, in this value stack, in the future, 50% of the value may be created in the service around your product, and 50%, the remaining 50% is in your product. Well, who creates the value? And what does that mean to you as a product provider? Do you fall back to become the commodity producer? Do you leap forward and try to become a part of that value proposition? Do you have the capabilities to even enter into that? Do you start to find partners, Ford, Google? What's the thing? Okay, so that's the message. Those three slides build it to people where people in traditional industries to build products are saying, I see, okay, I kind of get where you're talking about. And then we start to have a discussion about strategy. We use this a lot. Strategies, like qualities, like a lot of things, it's just such a popular word. Putting some definition or some structure to it is sometimes helpful. So when we have a conversation that says, we're moving to a world of product and service, which is going to change the industry, and it's going to invite new players in, the question, when you start to think through the impact on your corporation, you have to start to decide, are we thinking about an impact that really changes what business we're in? Is this a corporate strategy issue? That's what we define corporate strategy as. It really is confirming what business are we in. Are we in the car business? Are we in the personal transportation business? Are we in the mobility business? Those are real identity questions. That goes to the strategic founder's intent. Companies were built for a purpose. The purpose is put in place with structure. Companies run. When something changes so dramatically that you have to really think, is our original founding purpose relevant anymore? And some companies are really looking at that. Other companies look at this and say, actually, our current service offering or our current products is still relevant. But this changes the way we go to market with it. It changes how we connect and talk to customers or how we interact. So that's a business strategy conversation. It's a little less life-changing, but you have to embrace it or you have to be aware of what you're going to do with it and what competitors are doing. And the last is functional strategy. That really is, for example, what's the IT department going to do this to be a better IT department to support our business strategy to reinforce what business we're actually in? Okay? We happen to believe that this technical discontinuity is going to ring on all three levels, but it's got to be led at the corporate level. What business are we really going to be in? Then the people can start to say, okay, here's how we're going to compete. And then the last piece is every functional area has to understand this enough to be part of this whole mix. Otherwise, we risk being a little bit schizophrenic. We say we're this, we build that, but we act differently when we talk with customers or suppliers and that sort of stuff. Okay? And this is a process. This isn't just flipping switches. This is a process. And that's what we're really looking to do with clients, is trying to wake them up to the point to say, I know you're watching. Don't be the frog in the pot. We're all frogs. We're all in pots. The water's getting warm. But we have to be taking the temperature and deciding, is this where we need to be or do we need to be somewhere else? And then how do we start to think about leaping? Discontinuities. Here's what happens. Some will evolve. Most will not. That doesn't mean they die overnight. That means they linger. They suffer declines in profitability. They just suffer declines in market share. Or they start to become acquired, parts of them or pieces of them, because what they have, the assets they have, actually are part of somebody else's new puzzle that is driving more aggressively to this. So the stuff that's in organizations is valuable. Whether it's reconfigured to be part of another organization, another industry, another joint venture, that remains to be seen. Some will take a leading role and pull their way out of this and actually redefine themselves. We have ideas about what the attributes of those companies might be, and we'll have to talk to people in those companies about, here's what we think the profile of an early adopter in this industry is going to be. A few more words on that a little bit later in here. Our big point is that there are some that will be so slow to adapt that we will call them failure to adapt. They will adapt too late. They will be the frogs that when the water finally gets to the point where they realize that this isn't good, they've lost the muscle capability, they've lost the capability to get out of the pot. And now they're going to be broken up and be part of somebody else's vision. Evolutionary truism. Evaluating before reacting succeeds. Fix the grammar on that, but evaluating before you react succeeds. Excessive delay in reaction fails. Those are truisms. That's just going to happen. It's genetic. It's in humans as defense. Look before you leap and be aware of sources of inertia. Inertia meaning delay in reacting. Okay? You can, this in 115 pages gets you a long way towards a dissertation in corporate strategy. I talked about it earlier. Firms are created for a purpose. The founders have intentions. They put a strategy in place. They start to build structure around it. They use that structure to build reliability, predictability in how they deliver their service offering. That structure is the execution mechanism around the chosen purpose. All great, simple. The model moves left to right from the start of the company. And the structure holds the strategy in place so well, the structure actually becomes constraining on alternate strategies. You are locked in so tight on this is what we do in the processes, in the data, in the applications, in the policies, in the people's mindset, in the skills, and really the capability, because capability is the unit that we want to study when we talk about transformation. What capabilities do you have? What capabilities do you need? How are you going to fill the gap to compete in the IoT world? What capabilities are you missing, and where are you going to get them? Buy them or build them. It's as simple as that. Okay? So our point is, this is always true. What you're going to have to do in any transformation is overcome the inertial effects of structure. Simple model. But what we start to do, and using the research that we've got, is really help people learn to do what we call a different dance and overcome some of the dominant logic stuff. Mr. back to you. Yep.
All right, so if you're keeping with us, the second part of this inertial effect is really the leaders themselves. As Warren said earlier, leaders in established industries, they've become leaders because they've done some things well, typically. And people that do things well, if you think of when you were in middle school maybe and you were looking for that first date and you went to a dance and music started playing and you started dancing with a person, maybe you got a kiss that night. Or maybe it became your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Well, the next time you had to go to another dance, maybe several years later with another person, you know what? You probably tried those same dance moves. And I would guess that many of you probably dance similarly now to how you did in middle school. And or if it didn't work well in middle school, maybe you changed somewhere, but you still dance based on that reward system of how it paid off the first, second, third time. Well, the same thing is true for corporate executives. People that sit in the C-suite, yes, they get education. Yes, they have nice networks of people, but the biggest factor in their decision-making process is the experiences that they had. And if all the experiences that they've had in our, let's say our Fortune 500, if the leaders of the Fortune 500 are primarily made up of folks that had positive experiences in a non-connected world, are they going to be making the right decisions in a connected world? We think that it's at least something that people need to be thinking about. We're not saying it's a one-to-one, absolutely not, or absolutely yes, but if they're aware of it, the decision-making pattern may be affected, and that's what we're looking for. So we have a few hints. We teach these as just a thought starter. Well, what would a few different dance steps look like, perhaps? Well, we think that there's going to be some really important functions inside of a firm, traditional functions inside of firms that are going to need to change. They're going to need to transform. One of which will absolutely be influenced by the government and by policy are things around like accounting. But we just talked, and I saw a lot of heads nodding when Warren was talking about value may not be only in the product, it may be in the services and in the information that surrounds the product. But if you go to your accounting departments, or to your clients' accounting departments, they count things, stuff, things that have retained value, not information. They don't account for it. Now, Wall Street's figured out a little bit of a way to correct for that in market price, but your accountants don't. So we think that your accountants, that might be one dance move that as you exit the CEO's office and the accounting department or the finance department walks in and starts sharing things, that might be a place that you need to press on. Marketing. If a product is now connected, is product marketing the same as it ever has been in the past? Probably not. If that product can talk to you, if you can have an interaction with the product directly, the product is now a channel. You can buy it directly from itself. You can buy services directly from it. You can buy another one when you observe your friend or your colleague's thing. That's different. That's absolutely affecting the way marketing works. And then IT, I think that's probably the most obvious. IT is always, slide the cheese sandwich under the door and don't come out of the back rooms. And now let's welcome to the front hallways of your value creation portion of our enterprise. That's a scary place for a lot of IT professionals. Not because they haven't challenged themselves to get there, but now that they're there, that's a different audience than maybe they've ever had. That's a different set of challenges, ones that they maybe haven't grown up with. So we see these three as transformative functions, and we think there's some newer functions as well. Ones that, as I spend time on campus, there's not really a good place to learn these things. If you look through an MBA curriculum and say, well, I'm going to go take the course load on alliance management, there might be some particulars of people that have those jobs, alliances, but where do you get trained in that? Well, you just kind of figure it out many times. You go find people that have been part of alliance programs. Corporations themselves have got to develop the training program. People aren't raised in that, so that's going to be maybe a new function. Integration and alignment. That white space, that's all that is integration between things that are already there. How do you manage that space? And products versus services. Companies that make things, they are product companies. Services are the afterthought. Services are the warranty department. Services are the second level of generated income. flipping that upside down and saying, product company, now you need to become a services company and understand the transition and the path that you walk to get there. That's a different approach. Okay. So what's a firm to do? So these are just a couple of thoughts that we had as we prepared for this particular session. Is really define what the impact is, recognize that potential for inertia and appreciate it, and find a self-scaling way of addressing it. Break that impact into required delivery capabilities. Do you have them? Where do you have gaps? Where do you have overlaps? Where do you need to potentially, and what do you need to do about that? And that's really thinking about, are you building it internally? Maybe you've always built everything. You've been a vertically integrated firm, and that's how you've done it. Can you do it this time? Will the speed matter? Or are you going to partner to that? Build versus buy? And then really we say be brave and move. Those that are going to get into paralysis around studying this and waiting for someone else so that they can judge the patterns of their industry peers, it may be too late. That's such a big reason of why we go back and look at many technological innovations that would never be talked about here. The steam engine, I mean, come on. When was the last time you were at an IoT conference that people were talking about steam engines? We think that there's a lot of value in looking at the patterns of the past. Looking at what did firms do when the steam engine was first introduced? What did firms do when electrification was first introduced? What did firms do when the computer or the internet itself do when it was first introduced? You're going to learn a lot by looking backwards in this case. Not about the technology, about the pattern. So this is really we're close. We got one more slide after this. This is the conversation. We wanted to get a little bit of feedback, and the forum may not be perfect for it, but we'll do our best if you're willing to go with us. Is what do you need to do to get out of that boiling water? What do you need to do to have that if you or your clients are those frogs? What do you need? Do you need certification courses around this? Do you need exposure to this? Do you just need time and they'll figure it out on their own? And I'd be interested if anybody has an opinion on things that are either working or not working, or if this is old news. Anybody have any comments on how you are addressing the boiling water? Richard, let me come back here with the mic. I don't know if I'm a little worried about this, but let's see how we do.
So most leaders like to see a path to success. How do you get leadership to visualize their business in a connected model? I think this is, so I'm sort of re-asking the question that you posed, but...
That's a good audience member will do. Just turn it right back around on us, so it's all right. Do you want to take a shot? Or let me make one comment, we'll see if we drive it over. I don't think we necessarily have here's the rolled out box of the service offering, come on up and we'll just roll it out to everybody. Everybody get their widget of change back here. But I can tell you, at least with MBA students for 3 years running at a accredited university in Michigan, what I've found them is they're going through a pattern, a repeatable pattern for 3 years now. The first is awareness, and not just awareness of the buzz, but really the underlying workings of the awareness. So just for instance, one of the guest lecturers I bring in is the ex-CTO of MapQuest, and he comes in and talks on two things. The easy one for him is the architecture. Here's the stack, here's the different models, we put up different models, we talk about here are different things that can work on mobility or non-mobility, etc. That's actually the easy one. It's highly technical and hard to implement, but it's the easy one to talk about. The hard one is monetization. When you ask a student, and I can ask all of you as well, when you've gone somewhere that you haven't been recently, maybe coming to this conference, how many of you used a mapping software to get there? And usually everybody raises their hand. And then I typically ask, how many of you paid for that mapping software? And usually nobody raises their hand. And then I ask, do you know that you're really paying for it every time you use it? And how about half of them go, well, I think I kind of understand that. And then we break it down and explain exactly what that information is and how it gets monetized and who's making the money and what the trade of value is. That is the first part. That's an example of the kind of awareness that comes. So the first piece is awareness. The second part is building up these different building blocks and studying these 7 blocks of inertia. We mentioned 2 of them today. And the third, what we've found, is practice. And some people could call that a proof of concept. In a class, we call that a class project. It is amazing to watch divisional vice presidents in the executive MBA program walk through and feel like they're back to ground zero when they have to talk about the value prop of a connected product.
So, Greg, I've talked to you in the past about the fact that we have kind of centers in this country that have lots of interesting things going on. This is Larry Steffen, These are your counterparts in Michigan. He's from North Carolina. He runs something called Riot, which is regional IoT. And you want to talk about your MBA quote program and what you're doing there with let's see, we got NC State and a few others involved. So
thank you, Carl. Didn't know I was going to speak, but Riot has been around about a little over a year and a half. We have 1,300 members, and we have programs on a monthly basis. The Wireless Research Center in North Carolina is the key sponsor of this as a nonprofit. Our first program will be in February 2nd this year. It's going to be on smart cities. And then we're going to do a series of educational programs for 5 months, and it's called an MBA on IoT. And we're going to talk about the overview of what IoT is, so many people don't understand the application and use. And the Wireless Research Center is a device-centric organization, but the community at large fills a lot of different gaps in terms of what IoT can be and should be. So we grow with the support of companies like SAS. We grow with the support of companies like Connected Development, that these are all integrated type companies. So we have large, small companies, and it's a very healthy ecosystem meant to be very inclusive so people can understand where they participate in this universe of IoT when it really, really happens.
That's great, and that's exactly the type of thing that we're looking to try to bring together of different places that exist. I'm assuming heavy research and health and electronic in that region, and in the Midwest where we come from, they've made products for a long time. Thank you. They've made products for a long time, and we may be able to kind of face it from the product side out.
I was just going to go back a little bit to the Rich's question about talking and getting top executives to rethink their vision a little bit. They're humans, and we use a slide in the connected course and talks about 5 phases of when somebody's confronted with a earth-shattering or a very catastrophic event, about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Expect that sort of thing. You see it. You see it in the press. At the Geneva Auto Show, when automotive CEOs are downplaying, a couple of years ago, the role of potential new industry entrants, electronics or digital firms, Google, Apple, and all this, it doesn't make any sense in the car business. We know what we're doing. But they're moving through those phases, and that's what you expect these executives to do, is move from that denial, anger, this isn't the car business, bargaining, there must be some depression, some sort of, and into acceptance. And you work people in there, but the number one thing is to start to get them with partners who can start to explain this, and they need to start to create some activity where this discussion makes sense inside the comfort of their own organization. And that's really what we try to start, but then we look to bring in more experts on how this actually could really work.
Any other comments or questions or thoughts for the team here? Yep.
Yeah, I've been at a couple of companies that had to change their business, mainly from a product to a service. And usually the big problems I've observed is how people are measured in this new world, and how different people in the organization, whether these new metrics are aligned. In many cases, they're not aligned.
That's a perfect example of the structure alignment that Warren was talking about. Structure isn't only organizational structure; it's all of the glue that fits together. I think I've heard you say that it's the patterns and the norms that make work tomorrow the same as it is today, or relatively the same as it is today. And those goals, motivations, those are all aspects of that structure. So once the strategy changes, if the strategy really is we're going to provide a service instead of a product, if that's part of the strategic change, the structure absolutely has to be changed, and it has to be done in a transformative, programmatic kind of way.
The other piece to that is because these new initiatives are going to compete for scarce resources inside the organization, for capital expenditure. And that's what drives the current program. And that's what pays the bills today and runs the profitability. And at some point, there has to be a discussion that says we are going to carve out X percent in order to invest in this and start to build it separately. Otherwise, if it has to compete with today's as-is product lineup, it really has a disadvantage. The discussion on the first day in the panel about ROI, how do we demonstrate it? These are nascent things. They don't have ROI initially. They have potential, and they have to be treated and invested like that. There has to be angel investors inside who are willing to put some money aside to do that. When Greg and I were in an IT organization, I made a deal with the CFO that for every dollar I could save in IT operating costs, I want to put 8% into the strategy and innovation fund that's mine. And so 92 cents goes to the corporation, 8 cents comes to me, and we can start something and show you what the potential may be. And that was a deal we had to broker. But that's what it takes to start to move it. And then these things eventually have to live on their own. They really have to demonstrate some, but they need an opportunity.
So I think... All right, so Carl's asking where can we go from here. I think it's also the let's wrap to the next session piece. Email address is behind. CGSadvisors.com is the website, although it's a website of a small company. So no, there's no newsletter, but the first place would be if any of this resonates with you and you'd like to have a one-off conversation, we'll be here. Let's exchange some information. Beyond that, electronics, and what we're really looking for people that have passion around this so that we can grow it together. Okay? Thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it.